at a lavish dinner, surrounded by gleaming silver and crystal. My husband Julian raised his glass. His eyes sparkled, but not with joy. They held a glint of something cold, something I was growing to know too well. He looked directly at me, a smirk playing on his lips. "Here's to creative unemployment," he announced, his voice carrying just enough to reach our friends at the table. His words hung in the air for a moment. Then the laughter erupted, a roaring, boisterous sound that hit me like a physical blow. His friends, men who worked for my company, joined in. "Evelyn, you should apply as a receptionist," one of them joked, wiping a tear from his eye. Another chimed in. "Yeah, maybe you could finally contribute." My heart, which had been hardening over months, felt a fresh crack. I lowered my eyes. I managed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was a practiced smile, a shield. Inside, a storm raged, a silent, terrifying storm that no one at that table could see. They had no idea. They had absolutely no idea that I was their boss. Their laughter, their cruel jokes, they were aimed at the woman who signed their paychecks, the woman who held their careers in her hands. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, even sweeter than the expensive wine in my untouched glass. But soon the sweetness would be all mine. To Julian and to everyone else in our social circle, I was Evelyn Reed, the quiet, supportive wife, the one who stayed home, who planned dinners, who attended charity events on Julian's arm. I was the woman who had no visible career, no grand ambition. "Oh, Evelyn. She's a lovely homemaker," it'd say, or with a slight pitying glance, "She enjoys her free time." Julian himself perpetuated this image. He'd often say with a paternalistic pat on my hand, "My little Evelyn prefers the finer things in life, not the hustle and bustle of the office." He thought he was being charming. He thought he was protecting me, or perhaps simply defining me in a way that suited his ego. In reality, the truth was a stark contrast. I was Evelyn Reed, the founder and CEO of Reed Technologies, a name that ironically he shared. My company was not just a small startup. It was a multi-billion-dollar empire, a titan in the tech world. We developed groundbreaking software, patented innovative hardware, and had contracts with some of the biggest names globally. My days were a whirlwind of board meetings, strategic planning, product launches, and investor calls. My nights were often spent reviewing reports, sketching new ideas, and connecting with my global teams. I lived and breathed Reed Technologies. It was my creation, my passion, my life's work. I had built it from the ground up, starting in a cramped dorm room with a single laptop and an idea that wouldn't let me sleep. I'd poured every ounce of my energy, intellect, and savings into it. The early years were brutal. Sleepless nights, ramen noodles, and constant rejections. but I persisted. I believed in my vision. And slowly, painstakingly, Reed Technologies grew. It thrived. It became a powerhouse. When I met Julian, Reed Technologies was already on its way to becoming a major player. We met at a tech conference where I was a keynote speaker, and he was a rising star in a smaller related field. He was handsome, charismatic, and seemed genuinely impressed by my intelligence and drive. He pursued me with an intensity that swept me off my feet. He told me he admired my strength, my ambition. He said he loved that I was an independent woman. But as our relationship deepened, I started to notice subtle shifts. He began to subtly suggest that my focus on work was too much. He'd say, "You work so hard, Evelyn. Don't you ever just want to relax? Or, wouldn't it be nice to have more time for us?" At first, I thought he was just concerned for my well-being. I thought he genuinely wanted to spend more time together. Then came the bigger hints. When we decided to get married, he suggested I take a step back from the day-to-day grind of the company. "You've built an amazing team," he said. "They can handle things. You deserve to enjoy your marriage, Evelyn." He spoke of me as if I were a delicate flower, easily wilted by the pressures of leadership. He convinced me that I could maintain my CEO title, but delegate more. "Let others handle the visible roles," he suggested, while I worked from the background. He framed it as a way for us to have a more traditional and peaceful life together. It wasn't a demand. Not overtly. It was a slow, steady erosion of my public persona, carefully chipped away by his persuasive words and the promise of a calmer, happier married life. I loved him. Or at least I thought I did. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he genuinely cared about my happiness and not just his own image of what a wife should be. So I agreed. I allowed him to manage my public narrative. I became the quiet partner, the silent power behind the throne. While my carefully chosen board members and executives became the public faces of Reed Technologies, this allowed me to work without constant scrutiny, to focus on innovation and to quietly observe. I convinced myself it was a strategic move, a way to avoid the constant media glare and focus on what truly mattered: the company's growth and future, but in a deeper fact is, more vulnerable part of my heart. I also hoped it was a test to see if Julian truly loved me for who I was beyond my achievements, beyond the power I wielded. I wanted to see if he would appreciate the woman behind the empire, not just the CEO who built it. What I discovered slowly and agonizingly was not love or appreciation. It was cruelty. It was a sneering contempt for the unemployed wife he believed me to be. It was a deeply ingrained misogyny that only surfaced once he thought I was safely tucked away in the shadows. He started to thrive on the idea that he was the successful one, the provider, while I was merely his ornamental appendage. The mask I wore was not just for the world. It was primarily for him. It was a way to see who he truly was, stripped of any pretense of admiring my strength. And the man revealed beneath that pretense was a stranger. A cruel and arrogant stranger. The subtle jabs at home began to escalate. At first, they were small, almost imperceptible cuts. "Did you have a busy day, dear?" Julian would ask with a patronizing tone, knowing full well I had just spent 12 hours leading a critical design review from my home office. "Or still working on your projects?" "I see," accompanied by a dismissive wave of his hand. He'd make these comments as he strode in, briefcase in hand, acting as if he had just conquered the corporate world, while I had merely been dabbling in hobbies. But soon, the private jabs weren't enough for him. They spilled over into public, becoming a new form of entertainment for him and his circle of friends. Our dinner parties, once lively and engaging, turned into stages for my humiliation. "Evelyn had a tough day," he'd announce to guests, eyes gleaming with false sympathy. "She was trying to decide which shade of white to paint the guest bathroom." His friends would chuckle, exchanging knowing glances. My cheeks would burn, but I'd maintain my faint smile, my mask firmly in place. These friends, a collection of men he'd brought in to read technologies, were particularly enthusiastic participants in my public shaming. Men like Gregory, our head of operations, and Simon, our chief financial officer. They were men I had personally approved for their positions based on Julian's glowing recommendations. They saw me as the wife of their boss, a non-entity, a woman who had somehow married into their world without earning her place. They strutted around the company like kings, oblivious to the fact that I was the one who signed their promotion papers, the one who approved their lavish expense reports, the one who ultimately decided their salaries. I'd see their names on internal memos, hear their confident, booming voices in the hallways I sometimes walked through when disguised, of course, and witnessed their pompous self-importance in company-wide emails. The irony was a constant sharp pain, yet also a source of growing power. I often held silent conversations with myself. They think they're so clever. They think they're superior. I'd remind myself of the long nights I spent building this company, the sacrifices I made, the risks I took. These men, with their tailored suits and inflated egos, were merely cogs in a machine I had designed and built. And now they were mocking the architect. The more they mocked me, the more silent resolve I gathered. Each condescending remark, each sneer, each dismissive wave of the hand was like adding a new brick to a wall of determination within me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was furious. But my fury was cold, calculated. It wasn't a wild, explosive rage. It was a quiet, simmering fire that fueled my purpose. I started observing them more closely. I'd listened to Julian's boasts about his accomplishments at the company, how he was streamlining departments or closing major deals. These were all projects that my executive team under my direct guidance had initiated and executed. He simply took credit. And his friends, who were indeed part of the company, enabled this charade. They'd nod along, praising his vision and leadership. One evening at a charity gala, one of Julian's friends, Victor, a senior manager in the sales department, approached me with a smirk. "So, Evelyn," he drawled. Still enjoying your permanent vacation? His eyes flickered to Julian, who was across the room, laughing loudly with a group of investors. You know, Julian's been working so hard building this company. It must be nice to just well exist. My smile tightened. It has its moments, Victor, I replied, my voice calm, almost serene. He didn't notice the steel beneath the velvet. He just saw the unemployed wife. He never saw the CEO who had approved his generous bonus just last quarter. A bonus he clearly didn't deserve for his flippant attitude and subpar performance. These interactions were constant. They were a daily reminder of the disrespect, the utter contempt they held for me because I didn't fit their narrow definition of success. But beneath my placid exterior, a plan was forming. A meticulously detailed, unyielding plan. I was not just going to endure their mockery. I was going to use it. I was going to let their arrogance blind them completely. The deeper they dug their hole of ridicule, the harder they would fall. Every laugh, every dismissive comment, every public slight was being logged, stored, and transmuted into the unwavering energy required for what was coming. They thought they were building themselves up by tearing me down. They were wrong. They were simply providing me with the motivation to tear them down from the very foundation they so carelessly stood upon. Julian's arrogance wasn't just limited to his treatment of me. It started to bleed into his professional conduct, making him careless, reckless even. He believed he was untouchable. He believed his position as the driving force behind Reed Technologies, as he often referred to himself, gave him free rein to do as he pleased. This carelessness was his undoing. It became the first crack in the facade, revealing the rot beneath. I started to overhear things. Whispers at first. Snippets of hushed conversations that would suddenly cease when I entered a room. Julian on the phone, speaking in a low conspiratorial tone, using coded language that made no sense. He'd often dismiss it as just business or something boring. Evelyn, you wouldn't understand. But I understood far more than he could ever imagine. One evening, I walked into his study to ask him a question, and he was on a video call. He quickly tried to minimize the window, but not fast enough. I caught a glimpse of a spreadsheet, rows of numbers, and column headers like offshore holdings and shell accounts. My heart gave a cold lurch. He stammered, making an excuse about reviewing old investment portfolios. I pretended to believe him, my poker face unreadable. But inside, alarm bells were ringing loudly. These incidents became more frequent. I started paying closer attention when his friends Gregory and Simon visited our home. Their conversations, even when guarded, contained unsettling phrases. We need to push this through before the time audit. The numbers look clean on paper, but just make sure the transfer goes through by Tuesday. They spoke with an air of entitlement, as if the rules didn't apply to them. I knew with a chilling certainty that something illicit was happening within my company. Julian, with his inflated ego and thirst for power, was using Reed Technologies for his own corrupt ends. And he had brought his friends. These men who mocked me for my supposed unemployment into his web of deceit. Instead of confronting him directly, which would have been an emotional outburst and a tactical mistake, I chose a different path. A quiet, calculated path. I decided to assemble a secret team. Not just any team, but the best. I leveraged my network, reaching out to contacts I had built over years in the industry. People who were loyal to me personally, not just to the public face of Reed Technologies. My first recruit was Elena Sanchez, a forensic accountant with a reputation for uncovering the most intricate financial frauds. She was sharp, meticulous, and had an uncanny ability to follow money trails, no matter how convoluted. I met her in a discreet cafe far from our usual haunts, presenting her with a hypothetical scenario that was in essence the truth. She listened intently, her eyes missing nothing. "This sounds like a job for a ghost," she said, referring to the need for absolute secrecy. I told her I needed more than a ghost. I needed an army of shadows. Next was Kenji Tanaka, a cybersecurity expert I had worked with on previous highly sensitive projects. He was a wizard with data capable of penetrating the most secure networks and unearthing hidden files. I tasked him with monitoring internal communications, financial transactions, and server logs, all without leaving a trace. "I need to know everything," I told him. "But no one can ever know I'm asking." Kenji, a man of few words, simply nodded and got to work. My secret team expanded. Lawyers specializing in corporate fraud, IT specialists who could trace encrypted messages, and even a former private investigator who could gather information discreetly. We worked in absolute secrecy, often communicating through secure encrypted channels I had personally developed years ago for sensitive R&D projects. We met in safe houses, used burner phones, and established an elaborate system of aliases and code words. Even my closest confidants on the board, and within my core executive team, had no idea of this parallel operation. I trusted them. But I couldn't risk anything being leaked to Julian or his cronies. The stakes were too high. What we uncovered was damning. It wasn't just a few shady deals. It was a systemic pattern of corruption that ran deep within the layers of Reed Technologies, directly orchestrated by Julian, Gregory, and Simon. They were siphoning off company funds into offshore accounts, inflating contract values to skim profits, and engaging in insider trading using privileged company information. They were manipulating stock prices, fabricating expense reports, and creating shell companies to funnel money out of the legitimate business. The evidence mounted forged signatures, falsified invoices, encrypted messages detailing their schemes and recordings of their boasts and plans. Elena presented me with detailed flowcharts illustrating the complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts. Kenji showed me screenshots of deleted emails recovered from secure servers, chilling conversations where they discussed how to cover their tracks. The scale of their deceit was staggering. They weren't just betraying me. They were betraying every employee who worked honestly, every investor who trusted us, and every client who relied on our integrity. My anger solidified into a cold resolve. This wasn't just about my personal hurt anymore. This was about protecting my company, my legacy, and the hundreds of ethical people who dedicated their lives to Reed Technologies. The rot was not just in Julian's character. It had infected the very core of my creation. And I, as the founder, the CEO, and the true owner, had to excise it completely. The evidence was irrefutable. The trap was being meticulously set brick by painful brick. Even with the mounting evidence, I needed to feel the rot myself to truly understand the depth of their arrogance and the extent of the toxic culture they had fostered. I needed to witness their dismissive behavior firsthand, not just hear about it through my secret team's reports. So, I devised a hidden test, one that would put me directly in their path, but in a guise they would never suspect. I created a false identity, Anna Walsh. My hair was styled differently. My wardrobe was simple and unassuming, and I wore minimal makeup. I adopted a quieter demeanor, almost shy, a complete contrast to my usual confident self. I used an old deactivated email address and phone number to create a new modest online presence. My resume, carefully crafted, showed a gap in employment, a few entry-level administrative positions, and a degree from a less prominent university. All designed to make me appear competent but unremarkable. The goal was to seem like someone desperately needing a job, easily overlooked and dismissed. Then I applied for an entry-level administrative assistant position within the very departments overseen by Julian's closest allies, Gregory's operations department, and Simon's finance team. I specifically targeted roles that would bring me into direct contact with their inner circles, allowing me to observe the casual cruelty and favoritism that permeated their teams. The interview process was an eye-opener. I went through several rounds, each one more condescending than the last. I sat in waiting rooms listening to junior managers gossip about their idiot wives and deadbeat girlfriends. They didn't know Evelyn Reed, the CEO, was sitting just a few feet away, absorbing every word. When I finally landed an interview with a manager directly under Gregory, the experience was precisely what I expected. The manager, a man named Philip, barely looked up from his computer. He spoke to me with a dismissive air, cutting me off mid-sentence. "So, Anna Walsh," he drawled, looking at my fabricated resume with a sneer. "You have a gap in your employment here. What were you doing? Taking a break?" He chuckled, as if the idea of someone not working was inherently laughable. "I was assisting with family matters," I replied, my voice deliberately soft, projecting an image of vulnerability. He scoffed. "Right. Family matters. So, you're basically unemployed and now looking for someone to give you a handout. Correct?" My blood boiled, but I kept my composure. "I'm looking for an opportunity to contribute," I corrected him calmly. He leaned back, putting his feet up on the desk, not even trying to hide his disrespect. "Look, Anna, we only hire the best here. People with drive, with ambition. Not someone who's just looking for a paycheck after a long break." He emphasized the word break with heavy sarcasm, frankly. You don't seem like you have what it takes. You're clearly not a go-getter. He never realized the woman he sneered at was the one who built the empire he was currently benefiting from. The woman he was dismissing as worthless was the one who ultimately approved his salary and his very employment. His arrogance was so profound, so all-encompassing that he couldn't see past the superficial persona I presented. My interview with a manager from Simon's finance team was equally illuminating. This woman, a stern-faced individual named Diane, interrogated me about my lack of corporate experience. She scoffed at my responses, making me feel as if my very existence was an inconvenience. "We need sharp minds here, Anna," she stated, her voice dripping with disdain. "People who understand what it means to work, not freeloaders." The word hung in the air, a direct echo of Julian's jibes. The casual disdain, the assumption of my inadequacy, the thinly veiled contempt for anyone perceived as unemployed or less than. It was all there, just as I suspected. It wasn't just Julian. It was the culture he had cultivated, a culture of superiority and dismissal. These were the very people who were benefiting from my hard work, my vision, and my company. Yet they felt entitled to judge and demean me. The test confirmed everything. It cemented my resolve. Their behavior wasn't just a personal slight. It was a systemic problem that corroded the very fabric of Reed Technologies. It showed that their corruption wasn't just financial. It was moral and ethical. They dismissed talent, valued superficiality over substance, and created an environment where empathy was a weakness. I ended up not taking any of the Anna Walsh positions. Of course, my goal wasn't to get hired. It was to observe. The experience, though painful, was invaluable. It stripped away any lingering doubts. It showed me the true faces of the people Julian had surrounded himself with, and the profound disrespect they harbored for anyone they deemed beneath them. And through it all, they never once suspected. They never once connected the dots between the quiet, unassuming Anna Walsh and Evelyn Reed, the CEO of the multi-billion-dollar company they so arrogantly believed they controlled. At home, after my Anna Walsh charade, Julian unknowingly added insult to injury, sealing his own fate with every arrogant word. He would come home from work, brimming with self-importance, and recount his day's victories. Among these victories, he often included detailed anecdotes of how he or his cronies had put some worthless applicant in their place. He had no idea he was mocking me directly. "You won't believe the parade of incompetence I saw today, Evelyn," he'd say, sprawling on the couch, loosening his tie. "There was this one woman, Anna Walsh, for an admin role. Good Lord. The nerve. Barely any experience. A huge gap in her resume. She actually thought she could waltz into Reed Technologies and get a job." He'd laugh, a deep booming sound that grated on my nerves. Gregory's team really gave her the boot. Said she was clearly a waste of time. My stomach would clench, a knot of icy rage forming. I'd maintain my serene expression. Maybe even offer a slight non-committal. "Oh, really?" I'd ask. My voice even. Betraying nothing. It took every ounce of my self-control not to scream. To not shatter the illusion. To not reveal the truth right then and there. He would continue oblivious. Yeah. They really put her in her place. She thought she was so clever talking about contributing. Some people just don't understand how the real world works. You have to earn your way. His words were a bitter irony. A direct reflection of his own unearned arrogance. He preached about earning one's way while actively stealing from the company I had built. I stayed quiet, letting him believe he was untouchable. Each story, each boast about humiliating Anna, solidified my resolve. It was proof of his utter lack of empathy. His disdain for those he perceived as weaker or less successful. He reveled in their dismissal, seeing it as confirmation of his own superiority. He truly believed he was impervious to consequences, that his lies and corruption would dawn, never be discovered. This unshakable belief was his greatest weakness, and I was exploiting it to its fullest. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, my secret team was working tirelessly. The trap wasn't just tightening. It was becoming an unbreakable cage. Elena and her forensic accountants were meticulously documenting every fraudulent transaction. They had traced the money from Reed Technologies' legitimate accounts through layers of shell companies and into offshore accounts controlled by Julian and his associates. We had spreadsheets, bank statements, and wire transfer confirmations that painted an undeniable picture of embezzlement. Kenji and his cybersecurity experts had penetrated their most private digital spaces. They recovered deleted emails, extracted encrypted chat logs, and even retrieved voice recordings from their supposedly secure meeting rooms. We had conversations where Julian, Gregory, and Simon openly discussed their schemes. How to inflate invoices. How to bribe officials for favorable contracts. How to manipulate stock prices. And how to silence any internal dissent. We need to make sure employee name doesn't go to HR about this. I heard Julian's voice say in one recording, "Give him a severance. Or, better yet, just make his life miserable until he quits." No paper trail. His particular recording chilled me to the bone. They weren't just stealing money. They were actively harming people, ruining careers to protect their illicit activities. My legal team, and led by a sharp corporate attorney named Clara, was preparing the case with meticulous precision. We had binders filled with evidence, each document cross-referenced and verified. They were building an airtight case for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. We also identified several instances of harassment and wrongful termination that would lead to significant civil lawsuits. I spent hours reviewing every piece of evidence, every report. I wanted to understand the full scope of their betrayal, to leave no stone unturned. Every piece of evidence gathered was a brick in the wall, solidifying the case against them. Every time Julian mocked Anna Walsh, he was unknowingly providing me with more emotional fuel, more justification for the decisive action I was about to take. He was digging his own grave with every cruel word. every boast of untouchability. The silence I maintained was not a sign of weakness. It was the calm before the storm. I was like a hunter, patiently waiting, allowing my prey to wander deeper and deeper into the snare, utterly convinced of their own invincibility. The trap was set. It was time for the spring to snap shut. The morning of the board meeting dawned, crisp and bright, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. It was a day I had been planning meticulously for months, the culmination of years of hard work, followed by 2 years of patient observation and quiet resilience. I walked into the gleaming modern lobby of Reed Technologies, not as Julian's quiet wife, not as the dismissed Anna Walsh, but as myself, Evelyn Reed, CEO. My stride was purposeful, my head held high. I wore a tailored, powerful suit, a stark departure from the soft dresses and casual attire I usually wore in Julian's presence. My hair was pulled back in a sharp professional style, and my eyes, though calm, held an unwavering intensity. I felt every single one of my 34 years, every sacrifice, every late night, every battle fought to build this empire. Today, it was all coming to a head. As I entered the main boardroom, a hush fell over the room. The board members, my carefully selected executives, and Julian with his inner circle, Gregory, Simon, and a few others, were already seated around the large polished table. Julian was mid-sentence, pontificating loudly when he caught sight of me. His jaw dropped. Gregory and Simon exchanged confused glances, their confident smiles faltering. They clearly expected me to be anywhere but here. The few loyal executives who knew my true role but not the full extent of my plan looked at me with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. They knew I was the CEO. But seeing me step into the spotlight like this, especially with Julian present, was unprecedented. I walked to the head of the table to the large interactive screen where presentations were usually displayed. My legal team, Clara and her associates, followed closely, carrying heavy binders. Elena and Kenji, my forensic and cybersecurity experts, stood discreetly by the door, ready. Julian finally found his voice, a strained, almost comical squawk. Evelyn, what are you doing here? This is a board meeting, not a social call. He tried to recover his composure, his usual dismissive tone returning, but there was a tremor in his voice. I ignored him, my gaze sweeping over every face in the room. I saw confusion, fear, and in Julian's eyes, a dawning horror. I activated the screen. The Reed Technologies logo, familiar and strong, appeared. Then, with a single tap, it vanished, replaced by the first slide of my presentation. It wasn't a product update or a quarterly review. It was a photograph, a blurred image of Julian, Gregory, and Simon caught unawares, shaking hands with a known associate of a corrupt offshore shell company. Gasps echoed around the boardroom. Several board members leaned forward, their faces etched with shock. Julian started to rise, his face paling. "What is this? Evelyn! Stop this at once." I met his gaze, my voice steady, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. "For 2 years, Julian," I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the silent room, "I have collected proof. Proof of your fraud, your embezzlement, your manipulation, your betrayal of this company, of its employees, and of its values." Another slide appeared. A diagram illustrating the intricate web of shell companies they had used to siphon off funds. Arrows traced money trails, dates, and account numbers. Each detail was meticulously laid out. "This," I continued, gesturing to the screen, "is just the beginning. Reed Technologies has lost hundreds of millions of dollars due to your illicit activities. These are not just numbers. These are resources stolen from innovation, from employee benefits, from the very future of this company." Gregory and Simon were rigid, their faces ashen. They tried to whisper to each other, but the silence in the room was absolute, punctuated only by my voice. "You believed you were untouchable," I said, looking directly at Julian, who had slumped back in his chair defeated. "You believed that because I chose to operate from the shadows. I was blind. You believed that because I allowed you to take credit. I was weak." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "You survived because I allowed it. That ends today." I then activated a video clip. It was a recording clear as day of Julian in his private office boasting to Gregory and Simon about how he had tricked Evelyn into stepping back and how she was too clueless to ever discover what they were doing. His voice, once full of bravado, now sounded like a death knell in the stunned silence. The full weight of the betrayal, both professional and personal, hung heavy in the air. If this story is touching you, or if you've ever felt this kind of betrayal, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video. It's a huge help and allows me to continue developing this content. The board members, many of whom had been instrumental in helping me build this company, looked at Julian with disgust. My loyal executives, their faces grim, exchanged glances of vindication and relief. Every transaction, every manipulated report, every coded message. "We have it all," I stated, my voice echoing with authority. "My team, a team you never knew existed, has been meticulously documenting your crimes. We have bank statements, legal documents, and digital forensics proving every single accusation." Julian finally erupted, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and terror. "This is insane. You can't do this. Evelyn, this is a setup. You're just a bitter wife." I held up a hand, silencing him. "I am Evelyn Reed. I am the founder of this company. I am its CEO. And I am here to reclaim what is mine." I motioned to Clara, My legal team has prepared comprehensive reports for each of you detailing the evidence. Copies of the binders were distributed to the board members, their eyes scanning the damning pages. The boardroom, once a place of strategic planning, had become a tribunal, and I, the supposed unemployed wife, was the judge, jury, and executioner of their corrupt reign. The silence that followed my pronouncement was deafening, the air thick with the realization of their complete and utter downfall. The silence in the boardroom after my reveal was thick, heavy with shock and disbelief. Julian, Gregory, and Simon sat stunned, their faces pale, eyes darting frantically between me and the damning evidence being passed around the table. The board members, initially shocked, now looked at the trio with open contempt. I didn't waste any time. There was no room for negotiation, no space for pleas or excuses. My years of emotional neglect and professional betrayal had hardened me to their theatrics. I reached down and picked up a stack of pre-signed termination letters, neatly organized. Julian, I began, my voice cutting through the tension. You are officially terminated from all positions within Reed Technologies, effective immediately. Your directorships are revoked. Your access to company systems is cut. Your assets within the company, including your company car and any stock options not yet vested, are frozen pending a full investigation and recovery of stolen funds. His eyes, wide with panic, darted to mine. You can't do this, Evelyn. I built this company, he shrieked, finally finding his voice. It was a desperate, childish wail, completely devoid of the usual charm he used to wield. I stared him down, my gaze unwavering. No, Julian, I corrected him, my voice calm but firm. I built this company from a single idea in my dorm room. I poured my life, my talent, my savings into it. I gave you a role within it. I gave you a name. I gave you everything. And now, I stated, my voice gaining in power, I'm taking it all back. I then turned to Gregory, sliding his termination letter across the table. Gregory Thorne, Head of Operations. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Your blatant disregard for company ethics, your participation in fraudulent activities, and your active role in creating a hostile work environment are well documented. Security will escort you out. Gregory started to protest, sputtering. But I've been loyal. I've done everything, Julian asked. Exactly, I replied, a cold edge to my voice. You demonstrated loyalty to Julian's corruption, not to the company or its values. That is why you are fired. Next was Simon Chen, Chief Financial Officer. Your termination is also effective immediately. The extent of your financial manipulations and the depth of your fraudulent schemes are frankly astonishing. You systematically defrauded this company, and we have every single receipt, every single transfer, and every single fabricated report. Simon, usually so smooth and calculating, was speechless. He simply stared at the letter, his hands trembling. He knew the game was up. I then addressed the other two individuals from Julian's inner circle who were present, their faces now mirroring the same terror as their leaders. Their termination letters were distributed with the same cold efficiency. Your actions, while perhaps less central, were complicit. You enabled this culture of corruption and betrayal. There is no place for that in Reed Technologies. As I finished distributing the letters, a tense silence fell over the room once more. Julian, who had been muttering incoherently, suddenly stood up, slamming his fists on the table. This is a witch hunt. You're just jealous. Evelyn, jealous that I was finally making something of myself. I watched him, a profound sadness mixing with my anger. He still didn't get it. He still thought this was about my emotions, about my supposed inadequacy. He couldn't comprehend the depth of his own betrayal or the strength of my resolve. This is not about jealousy. Julian, I said, my voice low and dangerous. This is about justice. This is about reclaiming my company from the rot you introduced. I gave a subtle nod to Kenji Tanaka, who then gave a signal. Two large, imposing security guards who had been waiting discreetly outside entered the room. They walked directly to Julian. Mr. Reed, please gather your personal belongings. You are no longer authorized to be on company premises, one of the guards stated firmly. Julian exploded. You can't touch me. I'm the CEO. I'm the owner. He tried to physically resist, his face red with rage and humiliation. No. Julian, I repeated, looking him dead in the eye. I am the CEO. I am the owner. And you are a thief. The security guards, highly professional, gently but firmly, took his arms. He struggled, shouting obscenities, screaming my name, accusing me of everything under the sun. Gregory and Simon, seeing their leader being physically removed, offered no resistance when their turn came. They simply picked up their letters and, with slumped shoulders, followed the guards out of the room. The other two associates quickly followed suit, their faces etched with defeat. As Julian's shouts faded down the hallway, an immense, almost suffocating silence descended on the boardroom. It was a silence filled with relief, with apprehension, and with a profound sense of closure. The long, agonizing chapter of their destructive presence was finally over. The air felt lighter, cleaner. I turned to the remaining board members and executives. My loyal team. This has been a painful but necessary process, I stated. The legal proceedings against Julian and his accomplices will commence immediately. We will recover every stolen penny. But more importantly, I continued, my voice gaining a renewed sense of purpose. We will rebuild. We will restore the integrity of Reed Technologies. And we will ensure that something like this never, ever happens again. The looks on their faces were a mixture of exhaustion and renewed hope. They had witnessed the full force of my hidden power. my unwavering commitment to the company. The mask was off. The truth was out. And the rebuilding, the true work, could finally begin. The immediate aftermath of the boardroom reveal and the mass firings was a whirlwind. The news spread like wildfire through the company. Shock, relief, and a bit of fearful uncertainty rippled through the thousands of employees. For so long, many had felt the oppressive atmosphere Julian and his cronies had created. But few understood the full extent of the corruption. Now the truth was out. And with it came a palpable shift in the air. My first task was clear: to rebuild trust. Not just in the leadership, but in the entire system of the company. I couldn't do this alone. I immediately reached out to the voices Julian had silenced. The talented individuals who had been pushed aside for refusing to play along with his corrupt games. One of the first people I brought back was Maya Sharma. Maya was a brilliant engineer, a true innovator who had been instrumental in developing some of Reed Technologies' foundational software. She had left the company a year ago under vague circumstances. But I knew the truth. Julian had pushed her out after she raised concerns about some questionable financial practices related to a project he was overseeing. She was too ethical, too outspoken for his liking. I called Maya personally. "Maya, it's Evelyn Reed. I need your help." Her voice was cautious, wary. "Evelyn, I'm surprised to hear from you." "I understand why," I said. "But things have changed. Julian, Gregory, Simon, they're all gone. Fired. I need you to come back. I need your integrity, your brilliance to help us rebuild." There was a long pause on her end, then a sigh. "What truly happened?" "Evelyn?" she asked, her voice softer. I told her everything openly and honestly. About Julian's corruption and my 2 years of hidden investigation. I didn't hide my own pain or my role in letting it go on for so long. "I understand if you don't want to come back," I concluded. "But if you do, you'll have my full support to help us heal this company." Maya returned. Not just as an engineer, but as the new Chief Technology Officer. Her presence alone sent a powerful message throughout the company. Integrity was back, and talent would be valued over cronyism. She brought with her a team of other engineers who had been marginalized, creating a renewed sense of purpose and innovation in the R&D department. We immediately began rewriting company policies. The old policies, subtly manipulated by Julian's team, had created loopholes for their fraud and stifled dissent. We rewrote them to be transparent, ethical, and employee-centric. This included strict new financial oversight, robust internal auditing procedures, and clear guidelines for conflict of interest. One of the most crucial changes was the establishment of robust mentorship programs. Julian and his friends had actively suppressed younger talent, fearing they would eventually challenge their authority. We reversed this, creating pathways for growth, pairing experienced leaders with emerging stars. I personally committed to mentoring several junior employees, something I had desperately wanted to do for years but couldn't, given my need to remain in the shadows. We also opened anonymous reporting channels. This was critical. Many employees had seen or suspected wrongdoing but were too afraid to speak up, fearing retaliation from Julian and his powerful circle. Now, with the guarantee of anonymity and a clear independent investigation process, reports started to come in. Each report was treated seriously, investigated thoroughly, and appropriate action was taken. This wasn't about punishment. It was about ensuring a truly safe and ethical environment for everyone. The first few months were challenging. There was a lot of cleaning up to do. Not just financially, but culturally. We had to untangle years of complicated fraudulent schemes, renegotiate contracts, and assure our clients and investors that Reed Technologies was stable and committed to ethical practices. I held town hall meetings, speaking directly to employees, answering their questions, and openly acknowledging the pain and betrayal they had experienced. My direct, honest approach resonated deeply. I worked longer hours than ever before, but it was a different kind of work. It wasn't shrouded in secrecy or driven by the need for retribution. It was fueled by a fierce desire to restore my company, to honor the vision I had for it, and to create a workplace where everyone felt valued and respected. The fear that once haunted Reed Technologies slowly began to lift. The hushed whispers were replaced by open discussions. The closed-door meetings full of conspiracy gave way to collaborative brainstorming sessions. Laughter returned to the hallways. Not the mocking, dismissive laughter of Julian and his friends, but genuine joy. Employees felt empowered to speak up, to share ideas, to innovate without fear. My own executive team, the ones who had quietly supported me through my hidden operation, stepped up, demonstrating immense strength and loyalty. They helped me navigate the legal complexities, manage the operational challenges, and rebuild the morale of the workforce. We were a united front, committed to a shared purpose. The company began to flourish again. Not just financially, but in spirit. We launched new projects that had been stifled under Julian's regime, bringing exciting innovations to market. Our stock prices, which had seen a dip during the initial scandal, began to climb steadily, a testament to the renewed confidence in our leadership and integrity. Reed Technologies was not just recovering. It was transforming into an even stronger, more ethical, and more vibrant organization than it had ever been. The rot had been excised, and in its place, a healthy, thriving enterprise was reborn. The legal proceedings against Julian, Gregory, and Simon were swift and decisive. With the mountain of evidence we had meticulously collected, their defense crumbled. Julian's name, once associated with superficial success, crumbled in the headlines, stained with charges of fraud, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance. The media feasted on the story, detailing his spectacular fall from grace. He was not only forced to repay a significant portion of the stolen funds, but he also faced criminal charges and ultimately a public disgrace that left his reputation in tatters. The last I heard years later, Julian ended up working retail in a strip mall. A stark, almost poetic contrast to the lavish life he once led. Funded by my company. It wasn't a place of shame for those who genuinely worked there. But for Julian, it was the ultimate degradation. A visible symbol of his downfall and the loss of everything he thought he had. But honestly, I didn't care about his fate. His downfall was a natural consequence of his own actions. Not something I actively sought to inflict for revenge. My victory wasn't his downfall. It was the rebirth of my company. It was seeing Reed Technologies thrive stronger and more ethical than ever before. It was witnessing the genuine smiles on my employees' faces, the innovative projects taking shape, and the renewed sense of purpose that permeated every corner of the organization. The journey had been long, painful, and at times incredibly lonely. I had endured public humiliation, personal betrayal, and the agonizing process of pretending to be someone I wasn't. But through it all, I had held on to my core strength, my vision, and my unwavering belief in justice and integrity. I learned that true power isn't about public accolades or external validation. It's about inner conviction, resilience, and the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it means facing down those closest to you. Reed Technologies continued to innovate, to grow, and to lead the industry. But with a new foundation built on transparency, respect, and ethical leadership, we became a benchmark for corporate responsibility. A testament to the fact that success and integrity are not mutually exclusive. My own life, though forever changed, found a new kind of peace. I no longer wore masks. I was simply Evelyn Reed, CEO, founder, and a woman who had found her voice and her true strength. The quiet power I once harbored in secret was now my open truth. If you believe in justice over silence, if you've ever had to reclaim what's yours, or if you simply appreciate a story of quiet strength triumphing over arrogant betrayal,